In the development of our study, one of the first things we had to do was to arrive at a definition of the creative economy, creative industries, and the creative workforce, as well as define the scope of our study. When most people talk about the arts, they're actually referring to independent artists and the nonprofit arts sector. While both components have a significant impact on the overall creative economy, the definition of creative economy also includes for-profit businesses engaged in producing goods and services that begin with a creative core or are driven by aesthetics. In addition, the creative economy includes all aspects of the value chain related to creative products, including design, development, production, distribution, marketing, sales, and equipment. This definition of the creative economy helped us choose the specific industry sectors included in the study, but we also drew on the experience of previous creative economy studies to see where there was consensus about what industry sectors to include and which ones to exclude. There are a couple of ways to look at the scope of the creative economy based on the availability of existing data. One way is to look at the creative workforce, those people who are engaged in occupations that require specific artistic knowledge, skills, or creative ingenuity, working in industries that may or may not be considered creative. Another way to explore the scope of the creative economy is to look at creative industries, businesses that produce, distribute, or sell goods and services that result from the application of artistic knowledge, skills, or creative ingenuity. When studying creative industries, the data will miss some of the creative occupations that reside in industries that do not produce an artistic or mostly aesthetic product. For instance, designers who develop cars and so forth. However, such studies will capture workers within creative industries who may or may not be engaged specifically in creative pursuits. While some of the creative economy studies that exist have included information on both the creative industries and the creative workforce to get kind of a total picture of the creative economy, for the purposes of this report, we studied the creative economy of the South just through the lens of creative industries. So, for the South Arts region, we have several creative industries totals, which include 82,852 establishments, 1,167,108 people employed, $41.4 billion in annual payroll, and $142.6 billion in annual revenue. There are approximately 82,852 creative industries establishments in the South Arts region. This total, as you can see, includes almost 26,000 from film and media, almost 19,000 from design, more than 17,000 from visual arts and crafts, almost 13,000 from literary and publishing, as well as 7,000 from the performing arts and 1,000 from heritage and museums. As we go through today's presentation, the size of these slices of the pie will vary depending on the size of the industry, how many people they employ, their total revenue, and the size of payroll. But I wanted to make one note about the heritage and museums sector. That sector we definitely think is an undercount for our region, mostly because this study draws on information from for-profits, nonprofits, and the self-employed, but does not include government data. And there's a large percentage of heritage and museums institutions that are owned by local, state, and federal government, and those numbers are not included in this study. So the creative industries in the South employ a total of almost 1.2 million workers. These numbers break down to about 387,000 employed in film and media, 320,000 in literary and publishing, 160,000 in design, closely followed by visual arts and crafts with 146,000 and the performing arts with 133,000. Finally, there are about 20,000 employed in heritage and museums in the region. Creative industries workers in the South earn a total of around $41.4 billion annually, or at least based on our 2007 data. These figures include payroll and earnings by the self-employed, but not benefits. The total includes $16.7 billion from film and media, $10.5 billion from literary and publishing, and $6.6 billion in design. And finally, the creative industries establishments and the self-employed in the South generate about $142.6 billion in revenue annually. Again, you can see how these break out. By far, the two largest sector groups in our region are film and media and literary and publishing. In addition to aggregate numbers for the region, our study divides the data by state and presents state comparisons for the creative industries data in the South. Florida leads the region in all creative industries categories, in large part because it is the most populous state in our region with 18 million people. The pattern of state totals in establishments, payroll, employment, and revenues largely follows state population totals. So following Florida, Georgia and North Carolina each have around 9 million people. Tennessee has 6 million. Alabama, Kentucky, Louisiana, and South Carolina each have between 4.2 and 4.6 million, while Mississippi has just under 3 million. Again, these population totals largely influence the industry totals that we see. But in the full report, we also provide a per capita comparison of each state for each sector category. In the per capita breakdown, we see a flattening out of the difference between states. The per capita figures also show where some states have greater strengths in specific creative industries sector categories. Looking at our overall creative industries establishments per capita, Florida still leads the region, but followed closely by Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. However, the disparity between the states using per capita data is much smaller than the disparity using creative industry totals. This is the general pattern of the data throughout the report. However, there are some interesting differences among sector categories, with different states leading the region based on per capita figures. For instance, in the performing arts, Florida leads the region when looking at performing arts totals, including revenue, at $3.7 billion. Florida is followed closely by Tennessee with $3.1 billion. The other states in the region trail those two states significantly. However, when looking at the per capita data for the performing arts, Florida's lead over the other states is diminished, while Tennessee leads the region by far with $5.1 million in revenue from performing arts establishments and the self-employed per 10,000 residents. We use this guide of per capita instead of using per single resident. We did per 10,000 because when you're looking at numbers of establishments and numbers employed, we ended up with fractional numbers, which didn't make a lot of sense in presentation. So across the board in doing our per capita numbers, we looked at per 10,000 residents. And that's a model that's been used in a lot of other economic studies when looking at per capita figures. Regarding the lead in Tennessee in the performing arts revenue, while many people have suggested that this is the Nashville influence, there is also a significant performing arts industry in Memphis as well as other areas of the state. Another example is the literary and publishing industry. When looking at revenue totals for each state, the totals look similar to those in other graphs, with Florida at the top, followed by Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. However, when we look at per capita figures for literary and publishing revenue, again, Tennessee moves to the top, followed closely this time by Alabama and Kentucky. In other sector groups, Florida and Georgia rank at the top in design and film and media when looking at per capita numbers, while Tennessee and Florida rank at the top in heritage and museums and visual arts and crafts. Of course, the states that rank at the top fluctuate depending on whether you're looking at the number of establishments, the number employed, total payroll, or total revenue. In the report, we also included the top 10 creative industry sectors for the region in aggregate, for the region within each sector group, and then within the state creative industries profiles. Based on the number of establishments, the largest creative industry subsectors include jewelry stores and photography studios from the visual arts, radio, television, and other electronic stores, videotape and disc rental, and advertising agencies from film and media, architectural services, florists, interior design services, and graphic design services from design, and commercial lithographic printing from the literary and publishing industries. Newspaper publishers are the largest employer among the creative industry subsectors in our region. Other literary and publishing subsectors among the top 10 employers include commercial lithographic printing and independent writers. Film and media includes radio, television, and other electronic stores, advertising agencies, cable and other program distribution, and software publishers. Other subsectors in the employment top 10 include jewelry stores, architectural services, and specialized design services. Based on payroll, software publishers are the leading subsector in the region with almost $4 billion in payroll. Other film and media subsectors in the top 10 based on payroll are advertising agencies, cable and other program distribution, radio, television, and other electronic stores, and television broadcasting. Design sectors with high payroll numbers include architectural services and specialized design services. And then literary and publishing sectors included in the list are newspaper publishers, commercial lithographic printing, and periodical publishers. Based on revenue, the largest creative industry subsector in the region is radio, television, and other electronic stores with almost $14 billion in annual revenue. The other film and media subsectors with large revenues are software publishers, broadcasting, television broadcasting, and advertising agencies. Literary and publishing subsectors with high annual revenues include commercial lithographic printing, newspaper publishers, and periodical publishers. And then finally, design subsectors in the top 10 for annual revenues are architectural services and jewelry stores. In addition to sector category, state, and subsector comparisons, our study looks at industry cluster comparisons between the creative industries as an industry cluster and other major industry clusters in the region. The creative industries represent the fourth largest industry cluster in the region based on number of establishments with almost 83,000. The creative industries represent more establishments in the region than information technology and telecommunications, defense and security, forest and wood products, transportation and logistics, education, agribusiness, and manufacturing. Creative industries are the fifth largest creative industry cluster in the region based on total employment with 1.2 million workers. The one cluster that slipped above the creative industries from the previous bar graph is education, which is the highest employer in the region at 2.4 million. And then the creative industries are at least the eighth largest industry cluster in the region based on total payroll with $41.4 billion. Part of the reason for the move down the scale for the creative industries cluster is the suppression of payroll data in some economic census subclusters. The creative industries have higher payroll figures than transportation and logistics, advanced materials, chemicals and chemical-based products, forest and wood products, and agribusiness. And then, unfortunately, the source for industry cluster information does not also include industry revenues for comparison, so we're only able to compare the region industry cluster on this basis. The report also includes data on the nonprofit arts, culture, and humanities in the South Arts region, including totals and per capita figures for number of registered nonprofit organizations, number filing Form 990, annual revenue, and total assets. North Carolina and Kentucky lead the region for number of organizations per capita, followed closely by Louisiana. When looking at annual revenue per capita, North Carolina and Florida lead the region. And then looking at assets per capita, as you can see in this graph, Kentucky leads the region, followed by North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. And that pretty much summarizes the regional information, the aggregate information that's included in our report. In addition to that, we also create created state creative industries profiles for each of our 9 states in the region, which is also included in the full report. The creative industries profiles for each state include similar data that we've seen for the region in aggregate and the state comparisons, including establishments, employment, payroll, and revenue for specific sector categories, per capita figures, top 10 creative industry sectors, comparison of the state's creative industries to their overall industry totals, comparison with other industry clusters, and nonprofit arts data for each state. So,